You mentioned, President William Ruto, the Nairobi Declaration, the Africa Climate Summit. It was remarkable, bringing the continent to seek into the future a transformation of how energy is being supplied, how agriculture is being managed, how forest becomes an asset standing, not being chopped down. President Ruto, you talk about green industrialization for Africa being once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What do you expect from finance, from the discussion we have today, so this opportunity is realized? What is your vision? What is your ambition?
Thank you very much, Kristalina. And I associate myself with everything President Macron has said, especially in the space of where are we going to find additional new revenue sources for climate financing. The Africa Climate Summit brought African leaders together. And for a very long time, Africa has been in the corner of problems. We're trying to move Africa from being in the corner of problems to the corner of solutions. And we stated very clearly that we have ideas, we have suggestions, we believe Africa has the greatest stake in contributing to the solution around climate change. And we got ourselves here, this problem of climate change, because of energy, fossil fuel energy. We will get out of here again because of energy, renewable energy. And that renewable energy is in abundance in Africa. And that is why we believe that we are very well positioned to be part of the solution to the challenge we have today, so that, as Macron says, no country is left between making a choice between development or climate action. So we made a conscious proposition in the Africa Climate Summit. Number one, we said we are positioning Africa with our assets, that Africa has huge potential. We have 60% of the world's renewable energy. We have 40% of the world's minerals that can be used for transition. We have the largest, maybe 2/3 of the world's uncultivated arable land. We have the world's youngest population. So we have real assets that we can bring to the table to solve the problem of climate change and to solve the problem of development. And that is why we said three things are therefore very important. With our assets, we believe that the solution going forward is how do we tap into the huge green energy opportunity, potential and opportunity in our continent. We are lacking technology and we are lacking capital. And therefore, three things come into the equation. Number one, how do we unlock the resources that have been committed? Whether it is in loss and damage, and I'm very happy that we've made progress in the last few days, thanks to UAE and other partners. How do we then look at the international financial architecture? How do we empower World Bank? How do we empower the IMF to do more concessional funding? How do we reorganize their governance so that those countries that did not exist, many of them in Africa, when the IMF and the World Bank were brought into being, how do we get them to have a say? How do we speak to recapitalizing these multilateral development banks? How do we improve on liquidity, the subject SDRs that President Macron was talking about? How do we deal with the real issue of exaggerated risk that is destroying African governments. How do we de-risk African investments? And how do we bring on board finances from the private sector? And therefore, ultimately, we came down to green industrialization is a big opportunity. Big opportunity, why? Because we have the green energy. We have the green raw materials, whether it is bauxite, whether it is steel, whether it is iron ore. We can export very many green products out of Africa, whether we're talking about bauxite, aluminium, steel, green products to Europe in terms of food products. So Africa has the potential. We have the opportunity. We have everything that we need to power our green industrialization. And that is the reason why we are very clear about what is lacking. That is climate finance. And that is why we are willing to go all the way to the launch we are going to make in this scope of a new framework, what we called in Nairobi a new global financing charter. We're going to have a global financing framework according to UAE, and we are going to have here another framework aligned, synergized, so that by next COP, we will have a new financial pact that brings on board resources. How do we collect additional resources? Is it tax? Is it carbon pricing? How do we leverage on carbon markets? How do we bring into the equation all the issues around natural carbon sinks, whether they are our forests, whether they are our peatlands, and majority of these are in the part of the continent we come from. So we believe that Africa can make a huge contribution with our assets if we were to agree on how financing can be obtained, and we are ready and willing to play our part, including making a contribution in the new financing framework.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Look, what are the messages you want to bring? And out of the experience of Ghana, what do you want this new framework for climate finance to deliver for you?
So thank you very much indeed, Kristalina. I don't know whether you're responsible for the panel, but I'm grateful to be a part of it. Thank you very much for it. And also, of course, to our hosts for bringing us all here together and the work that they're doing. I think there are two or three things that, for me, are critical. First of all, the sums of monies that are required by the vulnerable. There are 56 countries involved in the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which at the moment Ghana chairs, but which is going to be chaired very soon by Prime Minister Miyamoti. We now have an independent secretariat, which is hosted in Accra, and the former president of the Maldives, Mohamed Nasheed, is the one who's going to be the new Secretary General. So we're going to have a formidable leadership, Mia Motley and him, to carry on the work of the thing. I think the first thing is recognize the scale of the problem. We're talking, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about it when he spoke, and we're talking about trillions of monies that are required for the transition to be effective in the vulnerable nations of the world. It is now clear to all of us that that money cannot come from taxpayers' monies in the West. It can't come from public monies. It has to come from the private sector, where the trillions of monies available in the globe are. And I think that points to one immediate solution for us. To what extent institutions like your own, the IMF and the World Bank, can become bridges for countries like my own and the vulnerable countries to be able to access these funds. Historically, the monies that we have access to have been the most expensive monies in the world. We are the poorest people on the globe. And when we borrow money, we pay more for it than those who have money. That is a situation that has, and it can only be reversed if the World Bank and the IMF become this catalyst for being able to access the large monies that are out there. And I think that for us, from what we have seen in Ghana, is something extremely important. That is one of the important decisions that have been taken by the Climate Environment Fund, which Mia Motley and Messi are going to carry on. The second, of course, is the issue of the voice. Yes. The decision that has been made by the IMF to have this third, as it were, voice for us is a very welcome one. But we want to see that trend carried across all the global institutions, that there is now an effective representation of those who have not been represented before, especially the Africans. Because if decisions are going to be made of the magnitude that now has to be done, those who are affected have to be there to be able to make sure that the decisions are the right ones that are going to be made. So that's the second and absolutely key aspect. And thirdly, the mindset. We've lived so far on the assumption that some people have to be poor for others to be rich. That mindset is what is at stake in the whole climate discussion. Because for it to succeed, for us to be able to make the transition that will enable all of us to live in this planet in an equitable and successful manner, we all have to see ourselves as part of one family. That has not been the picture up till now. Are people now prepared to recognize that we can create a world where there will be prosperity, will be even and broadly based? If that is possible, then the mindset that will allow us to make those decisions will also have to change. I think that these are the three, for me, the three institutional matters that we have to look at.
So the message is a better world is possible.
It's possible.
That is.
First of all, thank you very much, and all of us are very happy to be here to try to make concrete progress. And I think we need more money, and I would say smart money being channeled at the right position and going on the ground. So what we tried to do during the past few years is to mobilize much more public money on both climate change and fight against poverty. And what we tried to set up with your initiative, because more than 2 years ago it was your idea, Kristalina, and we just pushed this idea to have SDRs, a mission to rechannel, reallocate SDRs of rich countries towards poorest countries. And on top of that, to try to have much more mobilization of the balance sheet of both IMF and World Bank. And what we are building now with the Paris Pact for People and Planet is a very simple approach. Number one, nobody has to choose between fight against poverty and climate change. Because it was a protest of a lot of countries in Africa, in Pacific, in Latam saying, okay, you are lecturing us on climate change, but you are not given money in order to fix poverty and inequalities in our countries. Fair point. Number two, the way to fix these issues should be a national one. It should be decided by people in charge, and each country has decided its own way. This is a matter of objective, but it's not a unique model, a one-size-fits-all to be decided in Washington, D.C. or Brussels or Paris. Doesn't work. It's a national approach. Exactly what we launched in Glasgow with the JETP, what we are launching with the country forest package for biodiversity, a country-by-country approach. Third point, we have to mobilize much more money. And what we decided, and we launched in Paris, followed up in Nairobi, New York, and here we are multiplying by 3 the mobilization of money between IMF, World Bank, and finance in common. And I want to thank as well all the multilateral banks and development banks being present. And fourth, we need much more private money. So I think we improved because, for instance, on SDRs, we are at 110, something like that, and even more thanks to the commitment of EAU today. We have the Loss and Damage Fund, which is part of this initiative, and I want to thank Mia because it was an idea launched in Bridgetown Initiative. And we will commit up to 100 million on this issue and this fund to be clear. But I think we need much more. And we need a series of clarification. And I just want to complete this agenda and the 4Ps approach by 3 elements being part of it. One, on loss and damage. We will have to prepare to simplify the governance, and this is why I say up to, given the governance, because we should distinguish intermediary revenue countries and poor countries. We will have to give a very open mandate for the governance because it should not be over-monitored, and we discussed that with Ajay. And we should be very careful on 2 things on loss and damage. Number 1, it should not be a substitute of insurance and reinsurance business. Because for a lot of countries, this is their job. And we have to rethink and, I would say, reframe the financials. But it should not be taxpayers' money of certain countries to pay instead of what the insurers will leave. Otherwise, we will create a big disorder in this world. And the second point is in terms of contribution. All those who contribute to the situation should be part of it. And we should not forget prevention. And this is why, thanks to the SDRs, what the IMF is financing in a lot of countries are prevention actions.
Yes.
And it's very important because it's much more profitable than just financing loss and damage, because it's too late. I think we have to focus in the months to come on 2 additional things. One is how to have a better carbon market. We have a lot of private money. We have to be sure that this private money is fairly and rightly channeled toward the right actions. And this is the work we launched with Rishi in order to reform carbon market and to work together on biodiversity credits. But we need now a market in order to take into consideration the right carbon and biodiversity impact in order to channel private finance to the smart actions. And my last point is, clearly, we have private money, we have public money on our commitments, but we need international tax. I want to thank my good friend William Ruto because we conceived that in Paris and in Nairobi during the summit, launched this initiative, and during this COP, we launch very clearly and we start this task force for international taxation. And the idea is to have now this working group, because this international taxation should finance fight against poverty and climate change actions. And this task force should report next year, next week would be super, I would love, next year, and in order to find a compromise, but to make it in action for COP30 in Brazil. This is, for me, very good compliments to what we launched and what we are delivering. All in all, what we are doing in concrete terms is a complete reshuffle of our global governance. And I just want to conclude on that. The point is, our current architecture is no more adapted to our challenges. We need much more money. We need a better articulation between public and private. But we do need much more inclusiveness. A lot of countries today didn't exist where these institutions were created. They have no voice in our institutions. And this is why part of these actions and these concrete actions is as well now the reshuffling in the years to come of our common financial global architecture.
What next? Where do you see the UK making further contributions in the financial arena? Prime Minister Sunak.
Thanks, Kristalina, and it's been good to work with you on this topic for some years now. I guess let me start by saying that I recognize the frustrations about the limits of development and climate finance, right? If you look at it, developing countries pay 5 times more to borrow on private capital markets. Investment in renewables is growing at an extraordinary pace, but right now, I think less than 2% of that is going into Africa. And, you know, President Ruto has argued previously, others have, that that situation is completely indefensible. And I agree. I think we would all agree with that. And that's why the $30 billion Global Climate Fund that's been announced is so welcome. It's why the Global Climate Framework is so important. And I'm pleased that the UK is supporting that. But if we want, Kristalina, as you said, this bigger, better financial system that's going to help us get the SDGs back on track, deliver all the Paris agreements, and actually reverse biodiversity loss, then I think there are probably 3 areas where we need to focus, and it overlaps a lot with Emmanuel said earlier. I think the first is we just need fresh thinking about how we do this, and that's why a while ago we pioneered the use of climate resilient debt clauses, so that climate disasters don't become economic disasters, and those should be standard across the board by 2025. They will make an enormous difference. We need reform of the financial institutions. You and I have spoken about that in the past, and we support a conditional capital increase for the World Bank, and Ajay is sitting there, because where we can stretch these balance sheets to make a difference, we should, and I know that we will, which will be welcome to many people. So that's the first thing, is fresh thinking in how we do things. I think the second thing is just we need to dig deep and find the resources. So, you know, we're here today as the UK announcing over £1.5 billion of new initiatives, not only to the Loss and Damage Fund, which it's crucial that we've got that off the ground, but also for forest sustainability, which Emmanuel and you touched on with President Ruto, which is an incredibly important part, and we will deliver on our commitments. We feel a responsibility to deliver on the £11.5 billion of climate finance that we promised, and we will do that. And then I think the third area is to recognize that this can't be done with public money alone. And that's why leveraging private sector capital is so critical. London is an enormous global financial center. I took a decision 3 years ago to make it a net zero aligned financial center, and that is having an enormous catalytic impact. And in particular, things like carbon markets, which Ajay will talk about later, I think, are crucial for harnessing that private capital into those countries who need it, but also being creative about insurance products. Again, it's a big strength of London, and where we can have creative, inventive insurance products that work, that will leverage capital that we need at scale. So look, I think COP President said at the beginning, we need a step change in our approach to this, but if we do things in those 3 buckets, which again overlap with what others have said, I'm highly confident we can deliver that change.
So very much agree with you. Thank you.